Hi everyone, this week we're going to be taking a look at the historical origin of the legendary war between Atlantis and the Greeks, described by Plato but dismissed by most people as fictional. So according to the theory that we've been looking at over the past few videos, Atlantis was actually the Minoan civilization. So was there a war between the Minoans and the Greeks? Well, yes, there was. In fact, this is how the Minoan civilization ended. The Mycenaean Greeks fought a war against the Minoans, and they won and overthrew them, and then took over control of Crete. So that was the downfall of the Minoan civilization. And according to Plato, the Greeks and the Atlanteans fought a war against each other, and the Greeks won and overthrew the Atlanteans. So that matches perfectly with the identification of the Atlanteans and the Minoans. And even though Plato's story of Atlantis describes or presents the Atlanteans as being the aggressors in this situation, well, no one really knows to what degree the Minoans were the aggressors in the war between the Mycenaean Greeks and the Minoans. But what we do know is that later Greek records present the Minoans as the aggressors. We know from plenty of Greek records that they perceived King Minos, the legendary king of Crete, as being the leader of an aggressive naval power. So it doesn't really matter to what degree that was true, we know that the Greeks perceived it as such. But what about the timing of the war? Because this is a really, really important detail that almost everyone, it seems, almost everyone has missed. There are a few blogs or articles online that mention this, but it's really rare to find any mention of this, especially in the context of the Minoan theory, which is a real shame because it's such a clear bit of evidence for it. So, according to Plato, his account mentions some specific individuals who were involved in the war between Atlantis and the Greeks. He mentions Cecrops and Erechtheus and Erichthonius and Erysichthon. He mentions those in particular, those names, as the names of individuals involved in the war between the Greeks, Athens in particular, and the Atlanteans. And those names, those four names, crop up in other Greek records, independent of Plato's account. Like, for example, Cecrops, he's mentioned in the Parian Chronicle, and they're mentioned in other Greek records as well. Well, who were they? They were actually the names of four kings and princes of Athens early in its history. And funnily enough, they all are dated, according to these later Greek records, they're dated between roughly 1500 BC and roughly 1400 BC, so roughly a span of 100 years, exactly in the time in which the Minoans really were fighting a war against the Greeks. So that's a fascinating detail, a clear bit of evidence for the fact that this war between the Atlanteans and the Greeks was actually the same as the war between the Minoans and the Greeks. It's a shame, a real shame, that this is not more well known, because I'm sure that if it was better known, that Plato mentions these particular individuals in the context of the war between Atlantis and the Greeks, that it would be far more commonly accepted that the Minoans were actually the Atlanteans. And another detail which just reaffirms this is that Plato mentions famously that the war between Atlantis and the Greeks occurred about 9,000 years ago, or 9,000 years before the time of Solon, the person supposedly relating this account. So, obviously that's far, far further back than the Minoans. But, interestingly, he also says that Athens itself was founded about 9,000 years ago. And, well, we know that's not true, obviously, and we actually know from other records, other Greek records, when they believed that it was founded. And they believed it was founded about 1500 BCE. Cecrops, actually, one of the individuals mentioned by Plato, was said to have been the founder of Athens. So that's one key point of reference for the chronology of this event. The founding of Athens, it was said to have been contemporary with the founding of Athens, which apparently was in about 1500 BCE. And Plato also mentions the names of these 4 individuals who were involved in the war, who are also dated to about 1500 to 1400 BCE. So both those time references converge on this point, exactly the era in which the Minoans really were overthrown by the Greeks. So, as far as I'm concerned, that's clear evidence that the war between the Atlanteans and the Greeks was in fact the same as the war between the Minoans and the Greeks, which itself supports the conclusion that the Minoans were in fact the historical Atlanteans. So next week we'll have a look at the historical origin of the destruction of Atlantis. See you then.